Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
If you haven't yet had a chance to catch the Ag PhD radio show, we certainly invite you to do so. It's on Sirius XM Channel 80, that's the rural radio channel. Ag PhD radio airs at 2 p.m. Central each weekday, and it's Darren and me with a live call-in radio show. So you can call us and ask questions. You can email us. We'll answer those questions for you. We have a number of different guests on there. We have a pest of the day. We have a lot of fun. Well, anyway, we had a caller just the other day who was a truck driver. He wasn't actually a farmer, and he asked us this question. He said, what's the difference between banding and broadcasting fertilizer, and why do some farmers do one and some do the other?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, this field, we're going to do a little bit of both out in the field. We're spreading lime across the entire field. That will be broadcast. We'll be putting some P&K out in a strip till application. That will be banded. We'll probably broadcast nitrogen out here when we put pre-emerge herbicides out.
Actually, this year we probably won't band hardly any P&K. We'll do some with the planter, but we'll do manure as a broadcast for the majority of the P&K needs going into next year. But anyway, the point is some farmers will do both, like us. Every year we do some broadcasting, some banding. The reason why we want to do broadcasting, it's simple and easy and fast. The reason why we want to do banding is it's a much more efficient way to use the fertilizer. We can actually get by with less.
Well, and it depends on what you're doing too. When we think about broadcasting fertilizer, for us, nitrogen's one that, it doesn't make that much difference whether you broadcast it or band it because it moves around in the soil a little bit. So it will move with soil water. So if you spread it in a band, it'll spread out a little bit. The roots will find that. It'll be taken in with water. But when you're looking at things like potassium and phosphorus, they pretty much stay where they're put. And so by putting them in a band, it's a little bit different than doing it in a broadcast where the plant roots will have to grow to that band. But by leaving it in the band, there are some benefits.
Well, with this banding, just so we're clear on this, all it is a farmer is putting a concentrated strip of fertility either above ground or most likely below ground. It can be done at planting time. It can be done in the fall with a different machine. It can be done in the spring with a different machine. There are a lot of ways to do the banding, but it's putting all the fertilizer in a strip as opposed to just randomly throwing it out there in the field and spreading it all across the field, across every acre. The number one reason why it's more efficient to have this fertility in that band is because of the way roots grow. With roots, they don't just know where fertilizer is and say, oh, I know there's fertilizer over there, and send a whole bunch of roots over there and get it. What they do is they just start randomly growing in soil, typically taking the path of least resistance. And once they find areas where there's a lot of fertility, then they put out a bunch more roots in that area. We've done tests of this in the lab and behind plexiglass and everything. It's really interesting. When you put a zone of fertilizer there, you'll have roots that'll just be growing all over the place. And all of a sudden, when they get to that area where there's a lot of fertilizer, the plant must sense that and know, hey, there's a great fertility zone here. I got to send a bunch more roots right in this area now that I found it to get that fertilizer. So because of that, plants aren't just randomly hunting all over the soil. If a farmer puts his band of fertilizer right below where the seed is planted, for example, or even right with the seed, now those roots can find that. They put a whole bunch more roots out once they do find that fertilizer, and there's a lot more uptake this year as opposed to in broadcasting. It might be 2 or 3 or 4 years later when some of that fertilizer gets found by plant roots.
Well, that's part of this, is that farmers are adopting more banding practices because with RTK sub-inch accurate GPS guidance, we can put fertility out right now in the fall, and then we can plant directly over the top of it next spring. Now we can be perfectly right over that fertility, which really increases our efficiency. The other big benefit of banding is that in the soil, there are other nutrients out there that can tie up some of this fertilizer. For example, if you have lots of free calcium in your soil, it can tie up phosphorus. However, if you're going to band it, now you've got a concentrated band of phosphorus, and it's really tough for calcium to tie all of that up or tie a good percentage of it up. So just right there, you've got more efficiency, more available phosphorus with the same amount of pounds you would have put out in a broadcast.
By tie-up, what Darren's talking about here is calcium together with phosphate. If those combine, that can form calcium phosphate, and that is insoluble in water, and plants can't absorb it. So even though farmers got phosphorus sitting there, the root can't absorb it. It can't bring it in. that's obviously a problem. Well, once again, with this broadcasting versus banding, with mobile nutrients in the soil, things like nitrogen, sulfur, boron, really not a big deal. A farmer can broadcast, those nutrients will move in the soil, the roots will find them, or the fertilizer will find the roots sometimes because of the movement in soil, so it's not a big deal there. But with immobile nutrients, things like zinc, phosphorus, potassium, those don't move well in soil. A farmer is way ahead to ban those so you can get better uptake right away and worry about less tie-up later on. It's also more efficient then. If you're going to be using less fertilizer, it's safer for the environment. Obviously, we're using less fertilizer. We don't have to worry about as much loss then if we're putting fewer nutrients out in the field.
Well, one other thing that we're concerned about out in fields is weed control. Can you identify this week's weed of the week?